Okay, in this interview, I'm with Mr. Charles Edwards, the founder of Capriel Fund, specializes in algorithmic trading. Charles is also one of the top on-chain data analysts, my favorite analyst also. And he has developed, in my view, the best Bitcoin buy signal or indicator, hash ribbons, an indicator tracking the health of Bitcoin network hash rate. And so far, many well-known news websites in the field of cryptocurrency have used Charles' views and comments in their articles. And I can assure everyone that Mr. Charles Edwards is one of the few persons that has a deep understanding of Bitcoin, blockchain technology, and this market. And I'm going to ask him some questions about DeFi, Metaverse, and the future of Bitcoin. Of course, we're not going to explain what DeFi or Metaverse are. We want to ask him some more deep questions. Okay, I'm done with introduction. Charles, welcome.
Thank you, Mason. I really appreciate that. It was a very kind introduction.
Thank you, thank you. And let's start with DeFi question. Charles, what is the scope for DeFi in 2022?
Yeah, I think DeFi 2022 is really exciting. As a sector, DeFi, GameFi, and Metaverse are areas I'm really interested in outside of Bitcoin and algo trading. I think DeFi it offers a lot of tangible value to investors today, something which we haven't really seen in crypto until recent times. And it's gone through a lot of evolution in the last years. And obviously there's been a lot of failures along the way, but it really gives investors a chance to earn a yield. If people want a more risk-averse option, they can do something backed by stable coins. Obviously that does involve a level of risk that's not in traditional finance, but at the same time, it does offer, pretty typical returns of 10 to 20%, which is, 10 times what most people, at least in Europe and the US, would get at the bank. So there's that, which is really, it's a great opportunity for people if we're in a bear market, right? So there's a reasonable case to argue that maybe we are, or at least the return potential on risk assets may not be as good as it was a year ago. So that's quite exciting. In terms of the evolution, what's happening there, there's been a lot of change in the last year, and things like staking and was already there, but bonding and other incentive structures to try and keep people involved in a project. Some of them a bit controversial, perhaps, but in general, I think we've seen, the kind of like the last 1,000 years of human history in currencies and finance happened in the last 12 months in crypto. From hard asset currencies to currencies that have been backed by gold and silver and all that sort of thing in human history is happening in crypto, where they're backed by a portfolio of assets, or backed by nothing, or there's different airdrops and inflation structures. Lots of them good and bad, but the rapid pace of evolution is 1,000x what we've seen before. So there's some really exciting things happening in that space. For 2022, I think we're really seeing a bit of a step up in how DAOs, so decentralized autonomous organizations, are used and taken advantage of. And that's something that's really exciting as well. And then DeFi options vaults, so the bringing derivatives into the crypto space is also a really exciting development in the DeFi space.
Interesting. And let's talk about a little about Metaverse. Everybody is talking about Metaverse these days. Okay, is it something that has come to stay, Charles? Do you think?
Yeah, I think Metaverse is going through a bit of that, the traditional hype cycle. So I think it's definitely a huge, it's hard to categorize it, but it's a huge theme, which I think is here to stay and is only going to get bigger into the future. But it feels to me a bit like, 2017, 16, if you're in the crypto space, where there's a lot of hype and maybe not that huge amount of utility yet. That said, I believe strongly in the space. You can see it. It's the convergence of a number of trends. So, gaming and video games has been around for decades, but people don't quite realize the level of adoption that is in online gaming, and almost half the world are active video games today, and that in the next few years is expected to be more than half the world. And then you've got trends such as Corona, which caused a step change in digitization of organizations. Obviously, we're recording this remotely. I do business with my clients all remotely and by video calls, and often, well, I don't meet most of them in real life, and it's just the way the world is moving, and it's also much more efficient. You know, we don't need to necessarily jump on a plane. It's a cost saver, it's a time saver for everyone. So the integration of work, entertainment, that can be a number of things, gaming, NFTs, art, etc., into the online space is accelerating, and it makes sense that will kind of combine into that merge theme, which we're seeing organizations like Facebook lead at the moment. And I think crypto is perfectly placed for that, because not necessarily because of the technology layer, but because of the way it allows the financialization of that and the incorporation of currency into it. So if you're playing a game, for example, like Axie Infinity or any other game today, there's a number of people who play those games full time and earn a living out of it. And you're not just simply playing, but you get that play to earn benefit, and you can perhaps spend many hours to get a rare sword or some other element, and then trade that on as an NFT to someone else who wants to buy it without spending the time. So there's all these different financialization elements, which really only crypto has been able to bring to the table and is leading the way in terms of DeFi. And there's a lot of exciting opportunities there. I think a lot of them will probably, not do so well and probably die out into the future. But as a theme and as a suite of applications, I think crypto is perfectly placed for that metaverse genre.
Interesting. Charles, as you know, there are currently many projects in this field, okay? I mean, Metaverse, like Decentraland, Sandbox, etc., okay? Does the Metaverse move to an integrated world, or we will see all of them which operate separately?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think the best analogies for that kind of thing are looking at other network effect technologies and applications. So if you look, 15, 20 years ago at Facebook and MySpace, there were a number of applications. In the end, the better product, which gets the more traction and network effects, wins. So in that case, Facebook won, right? And most people use Facebook for that type of application. However, there are other similar social networks such as Twitter, which is more information perhaps based. There's TikTok with videos. So I do think we see a number of streams that operate parallel. Some will succeed, some will fail, many will probably fail. But I don't think there's just going to be one metaverse. I think there'll be many, and perhaps some will be used more for different applications. Perhaps some are more for art, perhaps some are more for work. It remains to be seen. But I think you can just expect a lot of change and evolution in which players come and excel in that space into the future. I really like the crypto options because it gives investors and people who live or work or game in that space the opportunity for ownership and to have some form of impact on that platform and project. So if you're an investor in any kind of DAO or something like NFT world or something like that, where you can perhaps vote on different projects or proposals that the team puts forward, it allows a lot more buy-in and you kind of have impact in where you live, like a democracy or some other environment like that. Whereas something like a Facebook run metaverse, perhaps you have less influence in that space. Perhaps there's more opportunity for how the marketing is used in that application to influence people. So I do think the crypto options are exciting, but yeah, we'll see over the next 5-10 years, I guess.
Okay, and are our expectation of Metaverse to make big changes in our lives real or reasonable, or is it just something that has come to improve our experience of gaming or social media?
Yeah, I think short term, it's probably more attractive or probably more utility for gaming. I don't think it's going to impact the workplace a lot in the short term. I think where we may see that happen is between the 5 and 10 year horizon from now. That's kind of where it fits into me with the hype cycle, where I think we're at the point where people see so much potential, and there's definitely a lot of potential there, but the actual utility is still quite low on that front. But those two paths will converge, I think, to a point where it makes sense to have a lot of these applications all embedded in the metaverse, and you simply have one login and do a lot of those things there. But yeah, I think today the biggest use case is definitely for gamers to financialize their time. But yeah, more will grow out of that for sure.
Great. And let's talk a little about the future of Bitcoin. I think it's very interesting. As you know, in 2021, El Salvador was the first country accepting Bitcoin as legal tender. How likely is it that big countries or say superpowers like the United States follow the path of the El Salvador? Is it possible, do you think?
I think if your time horizon is long enough, it's almost certain. I do think that at some point the US and other global powers will legalize or adopt it in some format. That may be some time out. Probably much sooner than that will be them actually acquiring it and holding it as an asset on their treasury. And simply, it's just a game theory outcome. If enough countries have it, you have to have some of it to remain relevant effectively. So at this point, I think that's years away, because there's no incentive for the US to legalize Bitcoin as tender, because they own the reserve currency, which gives them a lot of power around the world, because most debt and other trade is denominated in US dollars. So it wouldn't make sense. But at some point, if enough countries acquire Bitcoin, you need to have some. So the big, I think, crossover for me there will be when a G20 country acquires or legalizes Bitcoin. It will cause a very quick cascade effect, I think, within the G20 to say, okay, well, we need to have some. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's more. And that will cause a domino effect where everyone has to have some. And I think that's the first stage in treasury adoption of it. And then at some point, the legalization, I think, is probably inevitable. Simply, if you just look at the history of currencies, every currency has failed everywhere in the world. At some point, they go from hard assets to fiat currencies, where they're effectively backed by nothing, which is where everyone is today. And then at some point, they usually collapse, or they all have. So if you just look at history and the statistics of that, and then consider what the possibilities are going forward, it makes sense that at some point these current countries will adopt it.
Okay, interesting. And last question, Charles. It is about adoption, cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin adoption. At macro scale, what are the most important factors paving the path for more adoption?
Yes, I think the most important, in a way, I think we crossed the Rubicon in the last 12 months with institutions entering crypto and legalization happening in major countries like the US. Last year was really a step change in the industry, and we now have almost every major global bank or investment house it has a plan or has got Bitcoin as a tradable asset with their business. And almost every trading firm is also in the space as well. Started to see countries look at it, like El Salvador. So I think that step change, and in countries that have banned it, like India, have now enabled it. So I think we've taken a step leap in adoption, where almost it's just a matter of time now for other institutions to publicize they've got on their balance sheet. We're seeing in the data that that's kind of happening already. And then probably for other countries to have it on their balance sheet and acquire it. So legalization's happening, adoption's happening. It's a matter of time for those odds of different countries to acquire it happening and then accelerate adoption. So I think you'll see some clear events, which in hindsight will make things look like the adoption's happening quicker, whereas it's kind of going regardless. So some of those, I think, there's rumors of another South American country might be looking at legalizing or adopting Bitcoin. So any of those kind of actions by countries will be very significant. But otherwise, we write a newsletter every month, and every month we look at the main headlines, and every month there's half a dozen or a dozen banks, institutions or companies doing something or hiring teams to go into crypto. So I think we're living through that adoption curve right now, and it's really exciting times ahead.
Very good, very good. How do you predict market nowadays?
From here? So like, where do I see it at the moment? Or my view changes pretty quickly with the data. So I don't, this video may air some time out, and my view may have changed. But I think where we were a couple of weeks ago, the $30,000 to $40,000 range was a pretty good value opportunity in the short term. We're now seeing Bitcoin head towards 44,000. I think there's no reason that it can't go a little bit higher, but there's definitely some uncertainty in the near term that, rewind a year ago, we were at a prime time in terms of the Bitcoin halving cycle, which historically, that 12-month window after the halving has had significant price appreciation. We're now at a point which is historically the opposite, and we can see a lot of downside. So I kind of balance that historical downside with the level of the step change adoption I just talked about. So there's a lot of driving factors which I think can voice and keep Bitcoin at more elevated levels than historically speaking. But it's tricky to say. I'll say here, I think we can see definitely some more corrections. I think this whole year in general will probably remain in a similar range to the last year, somewhere between 30 and 60,000. But any kind of adoption event by a country could easily cause that to change. But in the short term, if you got a long-term mindset with Bitcoin and here to hold it for several years.
Personally, I'm an investor, not a trader.
Exactly. If you're going to hold it for more than 2 or 3 years, I think it's probably not a bad place. But of course, not investment advice. Do your own research. But
Thank you.
You can't go too wrong in the long run with Bitcoin.
I really enjoyed, Charles. Thank you for sharing your time and your views with us.